He left me the moment I told him. I was pregnant, said he wasn't ready, and walked away without looking back. Now, 22 years later, he's begging to meet the CEO's son he abandoned before birth. But my son has just one message for the man who left us behind. I was 21 when I found out I was pregnant. Young, in love, and completely certain that the man I was with, James, would be just as excited as I was. We had been dating for almost 2 years. He was charming, ambitious, a bit reckless, but I loved him anyway. We used to talk about the future like it was ours to shape. A house by the coast, maybe 2 kids, a golden retriever named Max. It all felt real. Until it didn't. I told him on a Tuesday evening, right after dinner. I had rehearsed it a dozen times in my head. "James," I said, my hands shaking slightly, "I'm pregnant." His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He blinked, once, twice, then slowly put it down. "Wait, what?" he asked, laughing nervously. "You're serious?" I nodded, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear his voice. He stood up from the table, walked across the room, then turned to me with a look I'd never seen. Before fear and something colder, regret. "I can't do this," he said quietly. I stared at him, thinking he was joking. "You mean you need time to process it, right?" "No," he said, firmer this time. "I mean I can't do this. A baby? I'm not ready. I have plans, school, my career. This wasn't supposed to happen." I don't remember what I said after that. Maybe I begged. Maybe I cried, but he didn't stay long enough to comfort me. He packed a small bag that night, left a note saying he'd figure things out from a distance, and walked out the door. He never came back. I didn't tell my parents right away. I knew how they'd react. They'd been wary of James from the beginning. When I finally did, their disappointment was sharp, not cruel, but crushing. I moved out of our shared apartment and back into my childhood bedroom. The silence at night was the hardest. That, and the emptiness of planning. A future that no longer included the person I thought I'd grow old with. Pregnancy alone was not what I imagined. I went to doctor appointments by myself, smiled politely at nurses who asked where the father was, and worked part-time at a bookstore until I was too swollen on my feet to stand for long hours. Friends drifted away. Some didn't know what to say. Others quietly judged. My phone grew quieter, and my world smaller. But something happened in that solitude. A kind of strength began to grow, quiet at first, then unshakable. When I felt my baby kick for the first time, I knew I wasn't just doing this for me anymore. I was building something for someone who hadn't even arrived yet, but who already deserved everything. When my son Noah was born, everything changed. His tiny hands curled around my finger, and I promised him right then I would never leave. No matter how hard it got, no matter who else disappeared, I would stay. I would fight. I would give him a life filled with love, even if I had to build it from the ground up, brick by painful brick. James never called, never wrote. He disappeared completely, like we had never existed. But my son? He became my entire world. And one day I would watch him build his own. The early years were the hardest. There were nights I barely slept, rocking Noah in my arms, while studying for online classes, answering customer emails on my phone, while spoon-feeding him mashed peas. Money was always tight. Time was even tighter. But giving up was never an option. I worked during the day as a receptionist at a small tech firm, and took night classes in business administration. I'd rock Noah to sleep, then sit at the kitchen table with textbooks and cheap instant coffee, eyes heavy but mind determined. Every little win, a passed exam, a promotion, a paid-off bill, felt like a brick in the foundation I was building for both of us. Noah grew up with front-row seats to that hustle. He never had the latest toys or fancy vacations, but he had something far better. A mother who never quit. He watched me balance work, study, and parenthood without ever asking for thanks. And in return, he became everything I'd ever hoped for. Curious, thoughtful, and endlessly motivated. By the time he was 12, he was already teaching himself to code. I'd come home from work and find him dismantling old computers from garage sales, turning them into Frankenstein machines that actually worked. At 14, he started designing websites for local businesses. At 16, he built an app that helped students find affordable tutoring services. By 18, he had a full scholarship to a top tech university, and still insisted on calling me every night. We never talked about his father, not because I told him not to, but because Noah never asked. He knew someone had walked away, but he never let it define him. I like to think he saw that same strength in himself, the kind you only get from surviving the hard parts. After graduating, Noah turned down job offers from huge corporations. "I want to build something of my own," he told me one night over dinner. His eyes burned with the same fire I'd seen in him since. He was a boy fixing broken toasters for fun. Something that actually helps people. Something real. So we did it, together. I left my job to help him launch the startup, an AI-driven platform that connected small businesses with affordable tech solutions. I handled the business logistics. He handled the code. We ran it out of our tiny apartment at first, eating takeout on the floor and pulling all-nighters like two college students on a mission. The growth was slow at first, but then one client led to 5 to 50, and within 3 years, we had an office, a full team, and investors knocking at our door. By the time Noah turned 23, he was being profiled in business magazines. Youngest CEO in the state, startup changing the game for small businesses, built from scratch by a single mom and her son. People called it a miracle, but we knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was every late night, every sacrifice, every time we chose grit over comfort. It was resilience wrapped in love, determination shaped by hardship. One day, after another successful investor pitch, Noah turned to me and said, "Mom, we did it." I smiled, my throat tight. "No, sweetheart. You did it." He shook his head. "I just followed your lead." And in that moment, I knew. Everything I'd gone through, every tear, every sleepless night, it had all been worth it. We hadn't just built a company. We had built a future. It had been over 2 decades since I'd last heard his voice. 23 years since James had walked out the door with a duffel bag and a look of cowardice in his eyes. In that time, I hadn't once received a letter, a phone call, or even a whisper of his whereabouts. He had vanished so completely it was as if he'd never existed at all. And then one afternoon, just as I was wrapping up a team meeting at the office, I checked my phone and saw the name, James Morgan. At first I thought it was spam, or a cruel coincidence. But when I opened the message, my heart dropped. "Hey, I just read the Forbes article about Noah. I'm amazed. I can't believe how successful he's become. You must be so proud. I know I missed a lot, but I'd really like to reconnect with both of you. Maybe we can grab coffee sometime. I'd love to get to know my son." I stared at the screen, trying to process the audacity behind those words. Get to know my son. As if Noah had just appeared out of thin air. As if James hadn't made the conscious choice to leave. The moment I told him I was pregnant, my hands trembled with a mixture of fury and disbelief. For years, I had imagined what I would say if he ever reached out, if he ever dared to come back. But now that he had, I found myself stuck between 2 warring instincts: protect my son at all costs, and confront the man who had abandoned us both. I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I went home and sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset, listening to the soft sounds of the world moving forward, as it always had, with or without him. That's when Noah pulled into the driveway. He walked up, loosened his tie, and sat beside me. "Long day?" I nodded. More surprising than long. He glanced at me, reading the expression on my face the way only a son raised by a single mother could. "What happened?" I hesitated. Then I handed him the phone. He read the message in silence. When he finished, he handed the phone back and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Wow," he muttered. "That's bold." "Yeah," I said quietly. "What are you thinking?" I looked at him, the man he had become. Kind, grounded, brilliant, and nothing like the man who had walked away all those years ago. I don't need a stranger showing up now that there's a title attached to my name. There was no anger in his voice, just clarity. He wasn't looking for a father. He already had everything that mattered: a foundation, a future, and a family that never left. As I sat there beside him, I realized that the message didn't shake us because we were fragile. It shook us because we were strong, because we had built something unbreakable, and no sudden reappearance could take that away. I picked up the phone, typed a single line: "You made your choice 23 years ago. We've moved on." And then I blocked the number. I didn't owe him anything, but some part of me, maybe the part that still remembered the night he left, wanted him to see, face to face, what he had walked away from. Not to punish him, but to prove that we didn't need him, that we never had. So I agreed to meet, on my terms, a neutral cafe in the city. 1 table, 3 chairs. No cameras, no media, no entourage. Just truth. Noah didn't have to come, but when I told him about the meeting, he simply nodded and said, "I'll be there." We arrived early. I wore a soft gray suit, nothing flashy, but professional, the kind of look that said I built something without you. Noah wore his usual understated confidence, slacks, rolled sleeves, and a calmness that made him seem older than his years. We sat in silence, sipping coffee and watching the front door. At exactly 3 p.m., James walked in. Time had not been gentle to him, not because he looked older, but because he looked worn, nervous. His eyes scanned the room, until they landed on us, and then he froze, just for a second, as if seeing us together knocked the breath out of him. He approached slowly, like a man unsure of the welcome he would receive. "Hi," he said, his voice quieter than I remembered. "Thanks for meeting me." I nodded once. "Sit." He glanced at Noah, who offered a polite, unreadable nod. James lowered himself into the chair across from us, folding his hands on the table like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "I've been following everything," he started. "The articles, the interviews. I can't believe how successful you've become." His eyes darted toward Noah. "You're incredible, son." Noah raised an eyebrow. "I'm not your son." James blinked, clearly thrown off. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant," Noah said, his tone steady, composed. "But let's be clear. You weren't there when I took my first steps, or when Mom stayed up all night helping me with my science project. You weren't there when we launched the company from our kitchen table. So don't show up now and pretend you had something to do with who I am." James sat back, stunned. "I made peace with you being gone," Noah continued. "But I won't let you rewrite the story now just because it has a happy ending, without your presence, without your name." He swallowed hard, eyes glossy. "I made a mistake. I was young. I didn't know what I wanted." He swallowed hard, eyes glossy. "I made a mistake. I was young. I didn't know what I wanted." "You knew enough to walk away," I said. The silence that followed was loud. Eventually, James stood up. "I understand," he said, voice cracking. "I just wanted to try." "I'm sorry." Noah looked at him one last time. Sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes it's just too late. And just like that, it was over. We watched him walk out, smaller than I remembered, swallowed by a crowd that didn't know his name. I turned to Noah, pride swelling in my chest. "You okay?" He smiled gently. "Better than ever." And I knew he meant it. A week passed before the final message came. It was short. No grand apologies this time. No pleas for a second chance. Just a quiet echo of the man who had once walked away. "I understand now. I truly do. I'm sorry for everything. I wish you both the best. James." I stared at it for a long time before handing the phone to Noah. He read it once, then looked at me. "Are you going to respond?" I shook my head. "There's nothing left to say." He nodded in agreement and slid the phone back across the table. There was no anger in his face, just calm, peace. That was the difference now. There was no fire left to burn, no grudge to carry. We didn't need revenge or closure wrapped in dramatic confrontation. We had already won by simply living our lives without him. That weekend, we returned to the office for a small celebration. Our company had just secured another round of funding, and we were expanding into international markets. Noah gave a short speech in front of our team, thanking everyone for believing in the vision. He ended by saying, "This business was built on 2 things, persistence and love. One from my mother, one I learned myself." I watched from the back of the room, eyes stinging. He never needed James, not once. And the man who'd abandoned us had missed the one thing you can't ever reclaim. Once it's gone, time. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city skyline. We stood together on the rooftop balcony, the air cool and quiet. "You know," Noah said, slipping his hands into his pockets, "I used to wonder who he was, what he was like." "And now?" I asked. "I don't anymore. I know who I am. That's enough." I wrapped my arm around him, resting my head lightly against his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, not because you're successful, but because you didn't let his absence define you." He smiled. "You were the one who taught me that?" We didn't speak of James again after that. Not because we couldn't, but because we didn't need to. Forgiveness didn't mean reopening the door. It meant accepting the past and then walking forward without letting it chain you. We had built a life, a legacy, a bond that didn't need fixing because it had never been broken. Just forged, under pressure, in pain, and with purpose. And for us, that was the real ending. Not a reunion, but freedom.